Many Beatles enthusiasts view Let It Be Naked as more of a personal project for Paul McCartney rather than a collective effort by the band. Released in 2003 after George Harrison's passing, the remix saw McCartney strip away elements that had been added by producer Phil Spector in the original version. It's widely acknowledged that McCartney was dissatisfied with Spector's production choices, and decades later, he revisited the album to reshape both its tracklist and overall sound. For many listeners, this version feels less like a Beatles release and more like McCartney's individual reinterpretation, with some even suggesting that it departs significantly from the band's original intent. On the r/Beatles subreddit, a fan remarked that the Naked version seems like McCartney's personal revision, not a true Beatles album. They argued that while the release is often presented as a return to the band's initial concept, it actually reflects McCartney's preferences. He reportedly disliked the orchestral embellishments Spector added, particularly on The Long and Winding Road, and years later, he reworked the album to better align with his original vision. According to this perspective, the initiative came solely from McCartney. John Lennon was said to have accepted Spector's work, even collaborating with him on solo projects. Harrison not only tolerated it, but also worked with Spector on All Things Must Pass, and Ringo Starr remained neutral. By the time Let It Be Naked was assembled, none of the other Beatles were actively involved. Although Harrison had once given tentative approval to the idea of a stripped-back version of the album in the 1990s, he didn't participate in its final production. Some fans find this troubling, feeling that Let It Be Naked lacks the collaborative spirit of a true Beatles album and instead comes across as a McCartney solo revision. Still, despite its altered sound, many fans believe criticisms of Spector's influence on the original are overstated. One listener shared that while they actually prefer Spector's version, claiming the changes, aside from those made to The Long and Winding Road, were minimal, they don't object to the existence of Let It Be Naked. They pointed out that the remix wasn't released as a definitive version, isn't widely promoted, and is hard to come by unless actively sought out. They likened it to modern remasters or alternate mixes, saying it's a nice option for those who are interested, without replacing the original. Given how emotionally invested McCartney was in the Let It Be/Get Back project, they felt it was fair that he finally had a version that brought him peace. Others, however, criticized McCartney's remix as feeling overly sanitized, lacking studio chatter, reverb, and the ambient atmosphere that gave the original its rawness. Even the track Don't Let Me Down was reportedly stitched together from two separate takes, which made it sound less authentic. Nevertheless, some fans expressed understanding toward McCartney's motivations. One suggested that the remix was his way of addressing the alterations Spector had made to his compositions, often without his consent, and of trying to set the record straight on how the album was meant to be heard. They personally favored the Naked version of the song, Let It Be. Another fan noted that the album was never intended to replicate the 1970 release, but rather to provide an alternative listening experience for fans, offering a fresh take on familiar material.